For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 114, printed in Part A of House Report number 115-650, offered by Mr. Duncan of Tennessee.
Pursuant to House Resolution 839, the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Duncan, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a very simple amendment to establish a national standard of care for hiring freight shippers. This is purely and simply about highway safety, and everything carried on planes, of course, goes to and from on our highways. Currently, there is no law that requires freight brokers or others to have any sort of standard when hiring a carrier for a shipment. Under this amendment, a broker or other entity would be deemed to have acted in a reasonable and prudent manner if they made sure the carrier met these 3 requirements. 1, authorization to operate by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. 2, the minimum insurance coverage required by federal law. And 3, that the carrier had no current federal unsatisfactory safety fitness determination. This amendment does not prohibit or limit in any way any type of lawsuit, and in fact, a lawyer could show that a broker or company had acted in an unreasonable manner if they did not comply with this hiring standard. This amendment would actually help trial lawyers by giving them stronger grounds to sue brokers who did not comply with this standard and tried to get cheaper rates by using unsafe or uninsured carriers. But this amendment would also make it less likely that a person or company that hired a safe, legal motor carrier would be held liable for an accident that happened through no fault of their own. This amendment also will help make it far less likely that unregistered, uninsured, unsafe freight carriers get any business in this country in the future. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon seek recognition?
I'll claim time in opposition.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes for the purpose of opposition.
There is a problem here, and the problem actually is the Department of Transportation. They launched a new carrier monitoring system known as CSA to make data available, but they have yet to establish a test and apply that data. So even though the data is available, the Republicans have adopted amendments, other Republicans that are here today, that prohibits DOT from finalizing a safety fitness determination rule. So there's data out there, but there is no bright line test. The best relief we could provide would be to force DOT in the very near future to issue a safety fitness ruling as soon as possible, and also raise the minimum insurance required. $750,000, it's been that since 1980. Doesn't cover much in a truck accident. We want to have people be able to get legal recourse and compensation, but we also don't want to give the brokers an impossible task, which is what they have now. How do they choose someone who meets the safety fitness requirements that the administration has yet to promulgate and Congress is preventing them from promulgating? With that, I would yield to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Cartwright.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the ranking member. Mr. Speaker, on June 1, 2011, Sal and Helen Sparich were sitting in traffic in Tamaqua in northeastern Pennsylvania when suddenly, without warning, a loaded tractor-trailer rammed into them from behind, cutting their car in half, killing Helen instantly, and debilitating and giving horrible, severe, grievous injuries to Sal Sparich. He ended up spending the next 15 months in the hospital, and then he died. And he left $1 million in medical bills, which Medicare had to pay for. What we know about this accident is that the driver of the tractor-trailer had a horrible driving record. The company, the fly-by-night independent contractor trucking company that he worked for, had an insanely bad safety record, and it was one that anybody could have discovered by going on the safety website because there were flashing yellow icons next to the name of that company. But the broker and the shipper in this case didn't care, Mr. Speaker. They didn't check. They didn't care about the safety record, about the driving record. The only thing they checked was who had the lowest price. The only thing they cared about was who had the lowest price. Mr. Speaker, we Americans care about personal responsibility and accountability. It's something we teach our children. This is an amendment that would take away accountability and responsibility for the brokers and shippers. This is a long-standing, time-honored part of American law that brokers and shippers are responsible and accountable for picking safe companies and safe drivers. This amendment would take away that. It would make American roadways much more dangerous because of this exact type of situation. I oppose the amendment. I urge no vote on it. Yield back.
And I yield the balance of the time to Mr. Raskin from.
Thank you
Mr.
very
Maryland
much.
is recognized.
Americans really shouldn't care that much about this Duncan amendment if they don't go on the highway. But if you go on the highway, like hundreds of millions of Americans do, you better watch out, because this amendment makes it far more likely that there will be reckless and negligent truckers on the road, and that you won't be able to sue for your damages if they smash up your car. Take the shocking case of a 19-year-old man whose car was totaled by a truck driver who was high on crystal meth. He was left injured and blinded for the rest of his life. Now, the truck company never drug tested or road tested its employees, but that didn't stop the shipper from hiring that trucking company to do business with. Now, the Duncan Amendment would reward the shipper by immunizing it from any liability for hiring a low-road trucker that doesn't drug test its employees, or even knowingly hires employees who are high on crystal meth or who have a drug problem. This would give the shippers even greater incentive to hire reckless and negligent truckers, making our roads and highways all the more dangerous. In Born to Run, Bruce Springsteen talks about cars that are suicide machines and a death trap. Mr. Speaker, this amendment would make that vision of our highways the law. There is no way that the American people support excusing shippers from liability for their decision to hire low-road truckers, low-road trucking companies that do not drug test or do background screening on their employees. I yield back.
I would reserve the balance of my time.
Well, time's expired.
Mr. Speaker, I yield for such time as you may consume to the chairman of the committee, Chairman Schuster.
I thank the gentleman. I appreciate his amendment. It does remove the confusion within the industry of stakeholders, but the hysteria that the other side is proclaiming that roadways are going to become a slaughterhouse because if this goes away or it's clarified, truckers are just going to be out there running into people left and right. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's not a good business model for any company to just want to have an incentive, which is the other side, I think, said, to hire unsafe drivers. That's not a good business model. In fact, you'll go out of business most likely if you go out there and hire drivers that are bad drivers, dangerous drivers. And the facts don't bear out. 70 of the auto accidents that include trucks in it, over 75% of them are not the trucker's fault. It's the person in the car's fault. Truckers are professionals, and to impugn this whole class of people, this whole group of people that go out these roadways and work hard every day and try to do it as safely as they can is just plain wrong. Again, as I said, truckers are professionals. 75% of those accidents that truckers are involved in, it's not their fault, and we continue to hype up and to put these things out there for again another class of worker out there, and that's the trial lawyers. They make millions and millions of dollars going out there and doing this, suing these people that, again, do their best every day to try to be safe on the roadways. So, again, this is a sensible amendment. This clarifies it, and it helps to make our roadways safer, not more dangerous. And with that, I urge adoption, and thank the gentleman again, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Washington's out of time. Recognize the gentleman from Tennessee.
Mr. Speaker, I'll simply say this. Neither of the cases cited by the opposition would be stopped under this amendment, and in fact, this amendment would make it more likely that freight brokers would be required to hire safe, insured carriers for their shipments, so it would make the highways safer, and I urge support for my amendment. It's a amendment about fairness and justice, because all lawyers, I was a plaintiff's lawyer before I came to Congress, And I've supported the trial lawyers in every way possible in my 30 years here, but I can tell you, no lawyers want people sued who have done nothing whatsoever wrong in a case. So I yield back the balance of my time and urge passage of this amendment.
The gentleman from Tennessee yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Tennessee. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Vote.
Pursuant to the Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Tennessee will be postponed. The chair understands that the amendment number 115